Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me. In my series, Freemasonry and Satanism. It's been a interesting trip making these videos for 3 years. Back in 2005, I had one of those big 0 birthdays and went to Costa Rica on the Pacific Ocean, Jaco Beach, sitting at a tiki bar. I was the only American at the tiki bar. Somebody was from Argentina, England, Canada, Germany, Norway, people from all over the world. And they weren't talking about America. They were talking about their country, their family, their problems, and their world. Anyways, we were having a good time, and somebody asked me where I was from, and I told them I lived in Florida. And the consensus was that they felt really sorry for we Americans because we didn't know what was going on in the world. We've all heard about the censored news in countries like communist nations, China, Russia. There goes that phone. So we've all heard about the news being censored. But little do most people know, the news and the information and the school systems, medical systems, economic systems, college, everything in the United States is actually being censored. The information that they want us to know, they allow us to know, a lot of it lies and deception. Who controls the United States? And it's been an interesting ride making these videos. This is going to be number 100. So I thought I'd find something special for the number 100, series 100. And I think I did. I've been talking about H P Blavatsky. We've been going over her other book, The Secret Doctrine. So what is the secret doctrine? What is this mystery school of Babylon? The religion of all the cults. Freemason cult, Illuminati cult, Rosicrucian cult, witchcraft cults, Kabbalah, and so much more. What do the Jesuits know? Why do we have a Jesuit Pope right now? And the Zionist. Why is there a divide in the Jewish camp? We got many Jewish people opposed to Zionism. And Zionism, what is Zionism? If you read some of the material, they plan on ruling the world from Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And they feel, like in the book I went over, the ultimate World Order by William Robinson, when he discovered a book called The Jewish Utopia. They think they're the aristocrats of the world. And back to the secret doctrine, and the Kabbalah, and the Rosicrucians. There seems to be this mystery, this secret divine deities. Pagan means many gods. And something called magic. I call witchcraft, so everybody can understand what I'm talking about. So the book is Blavatsky, Collected Writings, 1877. Isis Unveiled, Volume 2. And quite the book, I gotta tell you. Looks like we got 848 pages. I've got a little bit of reading to do. let's just take a look at the cover. The inside, the introduction. Got some common denominators here. We notice an earth with snakes and wings. Collected Writings, 1877. Here's one of the Theosophist leaders, Olcott. Kind of reminds me of Albert Pike, the leader of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Also the general for the South in the war between the North and the South. But he was the highest leader for the Freemasons' southern jurisdiction in the United States, Albert Pike. And Colonel Henry Steele Olcott was one of the people who went to India with H P Blavatsky and party and studied the Hindu, Indian, Tibet, Chinese, Buddhist religions. Came back to Europe and the United States and created the Theosophist Society with one of their initial magazines called Lucifer magazine and a publishing company called Lucifer Publishing Company. Just saying, might behoove us to be aware. These are the people apparently behind the new one world order, in cahoots with the Zionists and the Illuminati. Let's not make a mistake. These elites at the top of the pyramid, the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill, which represents Horus. And behind the eye, you'll see the sun on the U.S. $1 bill, which is the sun god. And the sun is a great light. And Lucifer's known as the light bearer. Statue of Liberty in New York has the big light. In the Olympics, they pass the torch, the light. So if you pay attention, you'll see these symbols everywhere. They want to bring about a new world order, and as George Bush Sr. said, out of chaos and anarchy will come the new world order. So it says right here, copyright the Theosophical Publishing House, 1972. Original edition, 1877. So I read books and I share. Some of the illustrations in this book. Krishna and the Serpent. Final scene in the Judgment Hall. Horus conducting Ani to Osiris. Circular Zodiac. Just looking up some of these titles on these images in this book. Isaac Newton. Alright, Isis Unveiled. And we have ISIS now, so-called, creating havoc, chaos, and anarchy in the Middle East. Many people say it's the same as Al-Qaeda, the creation of the CIA, the Pentagon, and NATO, and all the other forces controlled apparently by the banksters, the Illuminati, including the Council of Foreign Relations Heritage Foundation, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Illuminati, I said, Kabbalah, largely by the Zionist in Israel and worldwide, and the other mysteries school of Babylon, cults, temples, and lodges, and secret organizations, Bilderberger Group, Club of Rome, the Bohemian Grove, where they throw a baby in a fire. And apparently it involves gray aliens and reptilians and mind control, abducting children for sacrifices and other people. Just a lot of horrific things going on. And it seems like, as a last resort, if they can't get their New World Order voluntarily, World War III, unleashing some nukes. That should be concerning. Science and Theology. Mysteries of Ancient and Modern Science and Theology. H P Blavatsky, Corresponding Secretary at the Theosophical Society. So what I'm going to do is just start reading some of this, and maybe it'll blow you away like it blew me away. So I'm just going to start on page 626. But while the illiterate shaman, we all know what a shaman is, Carlos Castanza, that book I went over, the Carlos meeting with Don Juan in Mexico, taking peyote to visit the invisible world. Shamas. But while the illiterate shama is a victim, and during his crisis sometimes sees the persons present under the shape of various animals. So shamas, like psychics, can see auras or thought forms, give you readings, tell you about your past life, like Edgar Cayce. But apparently some of these shamas can see, when they look at a human, various animals, and often makes them share his hallucination. His brother Shama, learned in the mysteries of the priestly colleges of Tibet, expels the elemental creatures. Here we got elemental creatures again. Some kind of creatures that exist in the invisible reality. Not in the visible reality that you see me, or the physical reality, but the non-physical reality. And apparently these elementals are out there. And if you admit thought forms, wishes, good wishes, you can probably connect with good thought elementals. And bad wishes and detrimental energies apparently gets united with malevolent elementals. So they do, as it says in the Bible, Jesus had to expel unclean spirits and demons from people at least a dozen times in the Bible. So my goal is for myself and those who watch my video to try to get a handle on what is the occult. What are angels, demons, cherubim, and other creatures in this other realm? Do they exist? What are ghosts? Where do we go when we die? Where were we before we were born, possibly, if reincarnation is real? So if we keep reading this stuff, it should gel. We should get a better picture of reality, which any common sense person, once they understand this, and they understand that these secret cults ruling our world have this knowledge, then it really gets interesting. What do we do about it? Do we learn how to use this knowledge ourselves? So the Shama, learned in the mysteries of the priestly colleges of Tibet, expels the elementary creature, which can produce the hallucination, as well as a living mesmerizer, not through the help of a stronger demon, but simply through his knowledge of the nature of the invisible enemy. So one Shama sees a guy or a girl, and he looks at her and he can see the shape of an animal. So it tells him that that person is possessed by some kind of elementary creature. And so he goes to see another Shama who's trained like a priest doing exorcisms. And they get rid of that, they expel that elementary creature from that person, like the exorcist priest would expel an unclean spirit or demon from somebody. It says it in this book. We're talking about Isis Unveiled, one of the major books behind the Theosophical Society, H P Blavatsky. So is she lying, or is this true information? I believe it's true, what she's telling. Where academians have failed, as in the cases of Sivonos, a Shama or a Lama would soon put an end to the epidemic. So these shamans can stop epidemics. Are epidemics in some cases some kind of spiritual attack on humanity, groups of people? Some people say that. We have mentioned a kind of carnelian stone in our possession, which had such unexpected and favorable effect upon the shaman's decision. Every shaman has such a talisman. A talisman's like a little thing they wear around their neck. Most people would think of a lucky rabbit's foot. Lucky charm, four-leaf clover. You get it. So witchcraft, the Illuminati, and these evil mystery school of Babylon cults have some kind of magic talisman. A lot of them in the shape of a witch's circle, a circle with a star in it. And if you look at some of the medals, like the Freedom Medal that Obama gave Clinton and Oprah, it looks like a satanic witch's circle. And other medals that even Hitler gave one to Henry Ford, the automaker, looks like a witch's circle. So we definitely have this witchcraft going on in our society, which a lot of us already know if you're any kind of investigator. Like on the front of the dollar bill, on the far right on the one is perched a little owl called Moloch. And all kinds of 13s on the dollar bill with the star and everything. 13 is, of course, the death card in the tarot deck, and already has Friday the 13th and other symbolism as of the evil kind, malevolent nature, magic maybe. So we have mentioned a kind of carnelian stone in our possession, which had such an unexpected and favorable effect upon the shaman's decision. Every shaman has such a talisman, which he wears attached to a string and carries it under his left arm. Of what use is it to you, and what are its virtues? They asked. We often offer to our guide. So they asked their guide while they were visiting over here in Mongolia, I believe. What is that talisman for? To this he never answered directly, but evaded all explanation, promising that as soon as an opportunity was offered and we were alone, he would ask the stone to answer for himself. He would ask the stone to answer for himself. With this very indefinite hope, we were left to the resources of our own imagination. But the day on which the stone spoke came very soon. It was during the most critical hours of our life, at a time when the vagabond nature of a traveler had carried the writer to far-off lands, where neither civilization is known nor security can be guaranteed for 1 hour. So they're in a very serious, remote area. One afternoon, as every man and woman had left the yurta, the tent, that had been our home for over 2 months, to witness the ceremony of a Lameric exorcism of a Jedker. So a Jedker is an elemental demon. And I do notice in different countries they have different names for demons and angels and beings. Like, for example, in the Middle East, they call them the jinn. A lot of us would think of like a genie coming out of a bottle. I dream of genie. So the stuff repeats itself. So the Lameric exorcism of a Jedker, an elemental demon, accused of breaking and spiriting away every bit of the poor furniture and earthenware of a family living about 2 miles distant. The Shama, who had become our only protector in those dreary deserts, was reminded of his promise. He signed and hesitated, but after a short silence, left his place on the sheepskin, and going outside, placed a dried up goat's head with its prominent horns on a wooden peg. So he goes outside. Probably they were eating goat's meat, so there probably was a dried up goat's head on the ground. And they put it on a peg so it's standing upright, with its prominent horns over the wooden peg, and then dropping down the felt curtain of the tent, remarked that now no living person would venture in. So he walks up to the entrance of the tent, puts a goat, head's goat, on a peg, I guess facing outward, as an indication that nobody should enter the tent, and then he closes the curtain. Just explaining what I'm reading, to myself too. That no living person would venture in, for the goat's head was a sign that he was at work. OMG. If I saw a goat's head like that plucked in front of a tent door, I don't think I would go in. The Shama's busy. After that, placing his hand on his bosom, he drew out a little stone, about the size of a walnut, and carefully unwrapping it, proceeded as it appeared to swallow it. In a few moments, his limbs stiffened, his body became rigid, and he fell, cold and motionless as a corpse. But for a slight twitching of his lips at every question asked, the scene would have been embarrassing, nay, dreadful. The sun was setting, and were it not that the dying embers flickered at the center of the tent, complete darkness would have been added to the oppressive silence which reigned. So anyways, it says here, we have lived in the prairies of the West and in the boundless steppes of southern Russia, but nothing could be compared with the silence at sunset on the sandy deserts of Mongolia. Remember, Mongolia is where we got Genghis Khan, the invader who came down from the northwestern Middle East. That would be Western Russia, northern China, and pretty much conquered the entire known world back then, slaying so many people. And the philosophy of Genghis Khan and his other leaders, who were called hounds, was to be as brutal as possible so the people would be in absolute fear. And we notice all the stuff going on in the news these days, so this philosophy seems to be prevailing even today with all this fear-mongering that they're causing in the world, and with incidents like 9/11, not to mention, forget World War I, World War II, and other wars, and crisis actor shootings and bombings, and fears with global warming, global cooling, climate change, droughts. While it seems like, I hate to keep repeating all this, with the HAARP transmitters, microwave transmitters located strategically all over the world, look it up, HAARP, images, and you'll see where they all are, like a gigantic microwave oven. And then with the sky spraying of chemicals, which seem to get heated up, causing unusual weather. So they use fear even now. So they were in the sandy deserts of Mongolia. Anyways, so the guy was laying there after he swallowed the stone, looking like he was dead. Then the voice uttered, Muhandu, which seemed to come from the bowels of the earth, on which the Shama was prostrated. Peace be with you. What would you have me do for you? So this invisible entity, this Shama who looks like he's dead, is speaking like a medium. And it's like some kind of genie coming out of the bottle asking, what would you have me do for you? Startling as the fact seemed, we were quite prepared for it, for we had seen other shamas pass through similar performances. And if you've been watching my videos, you should be quite used to this stuff too, and probably be waking up to the fact there is more to reality than most people know. They say that 85% of the people or more are like zombies and are unaware of anything going on, and half of those people are probably adamant Hillary Clinton supporters, and the other half are adamant Donald Trump supporters, while 15 or less % of us are awake or somewhat awake and realize it's all being controlled by puppet masters. And when I'm reading the stuff in this book, we know the puppet masters are into these secret mystery school of Babylon cults, lodges, temples, secret organizations operating worldwide. And they have a plan. The Georgia USA Guidestones say they want to have a world population of 500 million and maintain it at that level. And it seems with the sky spraying and everything else, they're slowly attacking humanity and our environment, geoengineering. All kinds of toxins and poisons in food and water, fluoride, GMO, genetically modified foods, animals, mosquitoes. Crazy, but remember, these people want to remain in control of the world, status quo. They don't want the rest of us to wake up, and throughout history they have murdered many people, lots of people who were aware of their devious satanic activities, as we shall see when I'm reading this book, and others. Whoever you are, we pronounced mentally, go to K. So this Shama was under this trance now after swallowing the stone, and says, what would you have me do for you? And they said they wanted him to go to K. They didn't spell out the whole name here. And try to bring that person's thought here. So they have a friend who was probably back in Europe or something, and they wanted to bring her thought to them. Reaching through space and getting her attention while they were in the desert in Mongolia. See what the other party does and tell what we are doing and how situated. And I had those same thoughts when I had my own personal out-of-body experience. Christmas Day Eve, I wanted to go back to where I had spent the day. When I was out of my body, I thought I'll just go there, see what they're doing, come back and call them on the phone and tell them what had happened to me. But as I left my lighted apartment, I freaked out, thought I was dead, panicked, and wanted to go back to my body, and woke up stiff and looking straight up. And if you read about other people's out-of-body experiences, that's a very common situation. Because after you get used to it for a couple of minutes, you all of a sudden panic and ask yourself if you have died. So they wanted to get K's attention. That's what they asked this Shama, or this being who was talking to them through this Shama, which might be a medium. I am there, answered the same voice. The old lady is sitting in the garden. She is putting on her spectacles and reading a letter. So the Shama could astral travel, or the being that controlled the Shama, and found the lady and told the people what the lady was doing. The contents of it and hasten was the hurried order while they preparing notebook and pencil. So the people in talking to the Shama said, what's in the letter she's reading, and hurry up. The contents were given slowly, as if, while dictating, the invisible presence desired to afford us time to put it down the words phonetically, for we recognized a Wallachanian language of which we knew nothing beyond the ability to recognize it. In such a way, the whole page was filled. So the lady was writing in a language they didn't understand, but they could recognize the language. "Look west toward the third pole of the Utah," pronounced the Tatar in his natural voice. Though it sounded hollow and as if coming from afar, her thought is here. Then with a convulsing jerk, the upper portion of the Shama's body seemed raised, and his head fell heavily on the rider's feet, which he clutched with both of his hands. The position was becoming less and less attractive, but curiosity proved a good ally to courage. In the west corner was standing lifelike, the flickering, unsteady, and mist-like, the form of our dear old friend, a Romanian lady in Wallachai. So the image of that lady, the ghost-like appearance, appeared in the tent. And remember, these people are in Mongolia in the desert with their guide, the Shama. A mystic by disposition. So this Romanian lady was also a mystic, but a thorough disbeliever in this kind of occult phenomenon. So she was a mystic, but a total disbeliever in this kind of occult phenomenon. Her thought is here, but her body is lying unconscious. So she's back there in Romania lying unconscious, but her soul, her subtle body, is now in the tent in Mongolia. Just the image. "We could not bring her here otherwise," said the voice. So the spiritual being which controlled the Shama, unless it was the Shama's own spiritual being, but it says we could not bring her here. So apparently there were other spiritual beings involved that were controlling the Shama's voice. We addressed and supplicated the apparition to answer. So they tried to get the apparition to answer questions, but all in vain. The features moved and the form gesticulated as in fear and agony, but no sound broke forth from the shadowy lips. Only we imagined, perchance it was a fancy, hearing as if from a long distance Romanian words. They could slightly make out the words, "It cannot be done." You can see I read all this here in the page number 628. Again, I'm trying to just point out, when I talk about witchcraft and occult, I'm talking about knowledge of things that most of us are not aware of. But the people ruling and controlling our world, who do not want to lose their control of the world. They want to keep the rest of us ignorant, and they want to continue to be in control, as they've been for apparently obvious thousands of years. And they've caused wars and slaughtered humanity and used them for sex slaves and torture, food even, drinking blood, vampirism, etc. Torture, burning people at the stake. Humanity has suffered a great deal at the hands of these peoples, if they're people. For over 2 hours, the most substantial, unequivocal proofs that the Shama's astral soul was traveling at the bidding of our unspoken wish were given to us. So for 2 hours, they were completely convinced the Shama was doing their bidding. Then months later, we received a letter from our Wallachin friend in response to ours, in which we had enclosed the page from the notebook, inquiring of her what she had been doing on that day, and describing the scene in full. She was sitting, she wrote, in the garden on that morning, procrastinately occupied in boiling some conserves. In consequence of the heat, she thought, she fainted and remembered distinctly dreaming she saw the writer in the desert place which she accurately described, and sitting under the gypsy's tent, as she expressed it. Henceforth, she added, I can doubt no longer. So they wrote to the lady in Romania, told her what they had seen. She wrote back and said that she had fainted, left her body, and seen them in the tent. Even though she was a mystic and didn't believe, she's now saying that I can doubt no longer. But our experiment was proved still better. We had directed the shaman's inner ego to the same friend heretofore mentioned in this chapter, the Kachi of Lhasa, who travels constantly to British India and back. So remember, these people were stranded in the Mongolian desert with their shaman guide. We know that he was appraised of our critical situation. So they had this shaman who was in a trance, his soul, spirit, ego, whatever, get a hold of this friend of theirs who travels and appraise them of the critical situation in the desert. And for a few hours later came help, and we were rescued by a party of 25 horsemen who had been directed by their chief to find us at the place we were. So they even sent for help to be rescued from the desert location, and it worked. Which no living man endowed with common powers could have known. So there's no way anybody would have known where they were, other than the fact they used this shaman in a trance to contact their friend and let him know, and he got a hold of this other tribe and they sent some horses to rescue them. Remember, this is Theosophist Society, Isis Unveiled, a very powerful, popular book. As far as I'm concerned, this kinds of material are the foundation a lot for the New Age, and a lot of stuff I read in these books references a lot of the Egyptian ancient religions, also Rome's ancient religions, the Mithra god, and Isis, Horus, Osiris, Ra, Baal, the devil, Lucifer, Satan, and so much more. That actually can be confirmed, a lot of this information, with the Bible. FYI. The chief of this escort was a Shabaron, an adept, so another person who was illuminated, whom we had never seen before, nor did we after that, for he left his lamasery, and we could have no access to it. So he left his place where, I guess, where he was an adept, like a lodge or a temple. But he was a personal friend of Kachi. The above will, of course, provoke not, but incredibly seemed incredible to the general reader. But we write for those who will believe, who, like the writer, understand and know the illimitable powers and possibilities of the human astral soul. In this case, we willingly believe, nay, we know, that the spiritual double of the shaman did not act alone, for he was no adept, but simply a medium. According to a favorite expression of his, as soon as he placed the stone in his mouth, his father appeared, dragged him out of his skin, and took him wherever he wanted, and at his bidding. So when the shaman put the stone in his mouth, his father appeared and dragged him right out of the body and took him wherever he wanted to go. So how appropriate that I choose this book and this stuff for the 100th in the series. And I'm quite confident I'll have more than 12 two-hour videos on this book. I mean, I'll be trying to do book reviews on the Bible. Be 1,000 two-hour videos. But this kind of information is what they believe and what they write and what they think they know. And it's up to us to discern what we want to believe. And if these secret mystery school of Babylon cults, Freemasons, Illuminati, Rosicrucians, Hermetic orders, witchcraft, covens, Zionism, Jesuits, the Vatican, and all these other organizations into these secret mysteries, magic, control our world and have plans for us. It might behoove us to be aware and maybe even come to some logical conclusions why they want to destroy Christianity and defame Jesus and have people believe Jesus didn't even exist when they mention Jesus in this material. All these books I've been going over. None of these witchcraft type of occult, satanic, Illuminati, secret mystery school books and such, I haven't seen too many deny Jesus' existence, reality. Contraire. They want to say bad things about him. That he was just another prophet or into magic himself. One who has only witnessed the chemical, optical, and mechanical and sleight-of-hand performances of European magicians is not prepared to see, without amazement, the open-air and offhand exhibitions of Hindu jugglers, to say nothing of the fakers. When I looked the word up, that means like magicians. People who can do magic. And I'm skipping something here. I didn't read it all as usual. But I did kind of put a parenthesis around that paragraph right there. The reason I show you this, you could see if you doubt anything I'm saying, you can pause your computer and verify what I'm saying. I have seen, says a gentleman who resided in India, a man throw up into the air a number of balls, numbered in succession from one upwards. So the guy was throwing balls in the air. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 15 or 16. And you could see them go up and they would disappear. Smaller and smaller and smaller. A man threw up into the air a number of balls, numbered in succession from one upwards. As each went up, there was no deception about their going up. The ball was seen clearly in the air, getting smaller and smaller till it disappeared altogether out of sight. When they were all up, 20 or more, the operator would politely ask which ball you wanted to see, and then would shout out, "Number 1!" and the ball would fall from the sky. Number 15, and number 15 would fall from the sky. And so on, as instructed by these spectators. When the ball demanded would bound to his feet violently from some remote distance. These fellows were scantily clothing, and apparently no apparatus whatsoever. Then I have seen them swallow 3 different color powders, and then, throwing back the head, wash them down with water, drunk in the native fashion, in a continuous stream from a brass pot, held at arm's length from the lips, and keep on drinking till the swollen body could not hold another drop, and water overflowed from the lips. Then these fellows, after squirting out the water in their mouths, have spat out the 3 powders into a clean piece of paper, dry and unmixed. Wow. So you take a tablespoon of red powder, blue powder, green powder. Everybody's sitting there watching. Then take a brass pitcher and just pour it until it's empty and you can't take any more. And then spit out all the liquor, all the water. And then spit out the dried powder, not mixed. Maybe the green first, the blue, and the red. That's what it says here. What are we to believe? In the eastern portion of Turkey or Persia have dwelt from time immemorial the warlike tribes of their Kurdistan. This people of purely Indo-European origin, without a drop of Semitic blood in them, though some ethnologists seem to think otherwise, so some anthropologists and archaeologists don't believe that. Notwithstanding their brigade-like disposition, unite in themselves the mysticism of the Hindu and the practices of the Assyrio-Chaldean magicians, vast portions of whose territory they have helped themselves to, and will not give up to please either Turkey or all over Europe. So these Kurdistan people, Indo-European origin, were taking some of the Turkey and other countries' property and wouldn't give them up. Nominally Mohammedans of the order of Ummah, their rites and doctrines are purely magical and Magian. Even those who are Christian Nestorians are Christians but in name. Neither Russia nor England succeeded in 1849 in forcing them to recognize and respect Turkish from the Persian territory. So we still have all these wars and battles going on today in Bosnia. And even, I think Germany recently issued a declaration of warning to the Germans to prepare for a disaster. And the neighboring Czechoslovakia has issued the same order to its people. So apparently still in that part of the world, there are some battles to be fought. And looks like it might be World War III. And people over there, and even in this country, we have many secret societies who are aware of these kinds of witchcraft, i.e. magic. Remember, Hitler was into Manichaeism. Anyways, it says here, the Chandari, numbering and with their two patriots, are undeniably rather Manichaeans than Nestorians. Many of them are Yazidis. I've got a lot of work to do looking some of these words up. One of these tribes is noted for its fire-worshipping predilections. At sunrise and sunset, the horsemen alight and turning towards the sun, mutter a prayer. While at every new moon they perform mysterious rites throughout the whole night. Remember, this book's written a little over 100 years ago. Wouldn't doubt it at all if they're continuing, they're still doing this. While at every new moon they perform mysterious rites throughout the whole night. They have a tent set apart for the purpose, and its thick, black woven fabric is decorated with weird signs, worked in bright red and yellow. In the center is placed a kind of an altar, encircled by 3 brass bands, to which are suspended numerous rings by ropes of camel's hair, which every worshipper holds with his right hand during the ceremony. Wow. On the altar burns a curious old-fashioned silver lamp, a relic found possibly among the ruins of Persepolis. This lamp with 3 wicks is an oblong cup with a handle to it, and is evidently of the class of Egyptian sculptural lamps once found in such profusion in the subterranean caves of Memphis, if we may believe Kirchner. So they have this lamp, oblong shape with 3 candles, and they have this altar, and they're in this tent with these camel hair cords coming down, and all the worshippers have to hold on to their own cord. Just reading the book. It was one of the sacred vessels used in sun worship. The Greeks gave the heliotrope its name from its strange propensity to ever incline towards the sun. The ancient magi used it in their worship, the ancient magicians. And who knows but Darius had performed the mysterious rites with its triple lamp illuminating the face of the king Hierophant. So people don't believe. They think that all-seeing eye on the US $1 bill is just, for what? How can anybody logically explain that? And the eye? With the sun behind it? The pyramid, 13 steps? And on the other emblem, 13 arrows, 13 leaves, 13 stars, 13 stripes. Maybe there's a message here. And then there's a little circle on the front of the $1 bill. A little tiny circle about the size of a penny. Look at it really closely. You'll see the Freemasonic symbols. Mystery School of Babylon, Freemasonry, Illuminati, Rosicrucians, etc. Swearing under threat of death, having their throat cut, not to divulge the secret to the profane. We people who have not been initiated or illumined. Moving on. If we mention the lamp at all, it is because there happened to be a strange story in connection with it. What the Kurds do during their nocturnal rites of lunar worship, moon worship, we know but from hearsay, for they carefully conceal it carefully, and no stranger could be admitted to witness the ceremony. Thinking about the Skull and Bones, where George Bush was a member, and his father was a member, and John Kerry was a member, or Bill Clinton being a Rhodes Scholar, another one of these organizations. They're all part of it. You don't get into those kinds of positions unless you are part of it. And like in John Kennedy's case, President John Kennedy, and it just after his speech where he says, you can look it up and listen to his speech on YouTube, many videos of it, that secret societies are repugnant to our society, our culture in America. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And then he was determined to expose it. Then the next thing you know, at a Freemasonic park, Delaney Plaza, he was assassinated. So they carefully conceal it carefully, the Kurds, in their ceremonies, and no stranger could be admitted to witness the ceremony. But every tribe has an old man, sometimes several, regarded as holy beings who know the past and can divulge the secrets of the future. Divulge the secrets of the future. And I had one of my commenters, you're probably watching this video, say that there can't be time travel, or it had something to do with, then God would not be in control. And I am reminded, even Jesus in the Bible foresaw something happening in the future numerous times. And prophets have been around forever about things they saw in the future, and people who have been able to clairvoyance look in the past, or the government training people to be remote viewers, to spy and go see things that most people can't go see. They're astral bodies. Our U.S. government. Books written by Tim Rifat, I've gone over. David Morehouse, I've gone over. You can go on the internet, Ingo Swann, you can key in these guys' names and actually see them on some videos and talking about their experiences. There are even schools in America. It's like $800 or $1,000 you can go to for a week and take a class on how to remote view leave your body. And of course I have books I've gone over where people warn people to beware of these activities, because there are apparently some very evil forces, entities, out there in the astral world, the astral plane. And you can leave your body and actually be captured. In some cases, I guess, your soul can be consumed by some entities, which may explain sacrificing people. Maybe they're feeding some kind of entity souls, or getting some kind of favors done by some demonic entities for sacrificing people. It's crazy. All right, back to the book. But every tribe has an old man, sometimes several, regarded as holy beings, who know the past and can divulge the secrets of the future. These are greatly honored and generally resorted to for information in cases of theft, murders, or danger. So they had their own psychics. Remember, this is a big, thick book. Isis Unveiled, Helena Blavatsky, first president of the Theosophical Society, publisher of the Lucifer magazine, creator of Lucifer Publishing Company, publisher of the Secret Doctrine, another big, thick book this size. And by the way, this is only volume 2. So I gotta go on the internet and find volume 1. This information is just, wow. And these people have an office next to the United Nations. And it appears they're the ones behind all this New Age communist. We are all one. Ye are gods. Which I call beguilement and deception and propaganda. Sustainability, biodiversity, fencing off more than 50% of the land in the United States, herding all the people into cities. And apparently on another video I was watching this morning, at epidemic levels. What the word epidemic means. A lot. But apparently there's a disappearance of homeless people. And the video was suggesting that they are being cremated, gathered up on all the cities everywhere. Millions of them missing. And the economy is getting worse, so I would imagine that more people will become homeless. And if they're really interested in working towards a depopulation effort, it could be very ominous for the rest of us unless we wake up. As our object is to not do an autobiography, so they're not interested in doing an autobiography or autobiographical. We omit all details that have no immediate bearing upon some occult fact, and even to these have room but for a few. So they're only trying to publish in this book occult facts. They call it occult, by the way, which I use the word witchcraft so people can get it. Take the mystery out of the mystery. But what is witchcraft? What can they do? And I hope I've been exposing some of that in these recent books I've been doing on the Rosicrucian initiations, the karma, the thought forms, and now Helena Blavatsky's this Isis Unveiled. Interestingly enough, that's ISIS in the Middle East, which a lot of people on websites and alternate investigators and whistleblowers are saying, like Al-Qaeda, are actually hired mercenaries made to do the bidding of the Illuminati world leaders, New Age and New World Order, of which the Vatican and the current Pope is a huge part, as well as the Zionist in Israel, which are relentlessly, brutally displacing or murdering all of the Arabs. And apparently on one video, another one I was watching this morning, over there in Iraq, they are finding huge grave sites huge grave sites in Iraq, and witnesses were saying that ISIS types, Al-Qaeda types, were rounding all those citizens up, shooting them, beheading them, running them over with vehicles, and digging holes with bulldozers and burying them. And I'm going to make it real clear. I believe if we, the people, I'm in the United States, and I'm sure this is probably going to happen in Europe, if we, the people, do not wake up, just like those homeless people that are disappearing all over the United States right now, the beheadings and the slaughter of American citizens and Europeans, and the big holes dug with bulldozers and burying them all, is likely to happen. The people who run our world are of a very evil type, and they want to maintain the status quo, their position of control over the planet. Alright, moving on. So apparently they have these old men who are like psychics, and somebody stole a very expensive saddle, a carpet, 2 Carcerian daggers, richly mounted and chiseled in gold, had been stolen from the tent. We believe it, for it would have been unprecedented among these nomadic tribes of Asia, as famed for the sacredness in which they held their guest. So these people were guests of these Kurds, this tribe, who had been robbed of the saddle, the carpet, daggers mounted in, chiseled in gold. And these tribal people, nomadics, were famed for their sacredness in which they held their guests, as for the ease with which they would plunder and occasionally murder them once they have passed the boundaries of their camp. So apparently it's quite sacred to them, if you were a guest in their camp, to treat you well. But once you left and you were outside the perimeter of their camp, they could attack you, steal all your goods, and murder you without any qualms. A suggestion was made by a Jujorian belonging to our cavern to have resort to the light of the Kudian, a local tribal sorcerer of their tribe. So somebody stole some goods, and one of the people with the travelers suggested to the Kurds to use one of their sorcerers to find the thief. This was arranged in great secrecy and solemnity, and the interview appointed to take place at midnight, when the moon would be at its full. At the stated hour, we were conducted to the above described tent. So we'll see what happens here. A large hole or square aperture was managed in the arched roof of the tent. So in the tent they had a big hole up there, a square hole. Through it poured in vertically the radiant moonbeams, mingled with the vacillating triple flame of the little lamp. After several minutes of incantations, and I don't mean to be talking down to anybody when I use examples like abracadabra, hocus pocus. Believe me, in my conversations there have been quite a few people who didn't know what certain words meant. So I take the time to, I guess, be silly and use those examples. Pardon me. So the incantations addressed, as it seemed to us, to the moon. So they're making incantations, open, abracadabra, whatever they're saying, to the moon. The conjurer, an old man of tremendous stature, whose pyramidal turban So he had a pyramidal turban on his head. Touched the top of the tent. Wow, that's got to be a pretty tall turban. Produced a round looking glass, so this psychic sorcerer produced a looking glass, like a magnifying glass, of a kind known as the Persian mirrors. Having unscrewed its cover, he then proceeded to breathe on it for 10 minutes, over 10 minutes, and wipe off the moisture from the surface with a package of herbs, muttering incantations the while sotto voce. After every wiping, the glass became more and more brilliant, till its crystals seemed to radiate refulgent phosphoric rays in every direction. At last, the operation was ended. The old man with the mirror in his hand remained as motionless as if he had been a statue. "Look, Hanun, look steadily," he whispered, hardly moving his lips. Shadows and dark spots began gathering where one moment before nothing was reflected but the radiant face of the full moon. A few more seconds, and there appeared a well-known saddle, carpet and daggers, which seemed to be rising as from the deep, clear water, and becoming with every instant more definitely outlined. Then a still darker shadow appeared out, as visibly as at the small end of a telescope, the full figure of a man crouching over them. The sorcerer said, "I know him," exclaimed the writer. "It is the Tartar who came to us last night, offering to sell his mule." So again, I am not trying to say all this is the truth. I'm saying it's in a book like this. Helena Blavatsky, Theosophical Society. Part of this new age, this new teachings, these Isis, Osiris, and it's in this book. I'm going to go over more of it. The Palladians with the workshops to telling people that I am in communication with these otherworldly beings. The Pixies are here. The Palladians are here. The Syrians are here. The angels are here. The divas are here. The cherubim are here. And let's not forget, up there on the pew in the back are the demons. Maybe Lucifer and the angels who were kicked out of heaven. Cast out of heaven. Just throw in a little bit more in here. What is this other world? What should we know? What are we? What do they have planned for us? What is this new age that will be forced on people? And if you don't swear allegiance to it, you're likely going to be beheaded. Remember, the government, if you go look this up, don't ever believe me anything I say. Please take notes. Look it up. Because it's concerning to me. Heck, you might be saving my life if enough people research this and we can stop what's planned. But some truck drivers have reported delivering guillotines to military and maybe FEMA camps. Why would they need the guillotines? Why would they buy 450 million hollow point bullets? Why would they have even built all those FEMA camps? 20, 30 years they've been doing this. Why? Seems like fair questions to me. So they saw in the looking glass, it was the Tartar who came to us last night to sell his mule. The image disappeared, as if by enchantment. The old man nodded assent, but remained motionless. Then he muttered again some strange words, and suddenly began a song. The tune was slow and monotonous, but after he had sung a few stanzas in the same unknown tongue, without changing either rhythm or tune, he pronounced, recitative-like, the following words in his broken Russian. Now, Hanun, look well, whether we will catch the thief, the fate of the robber. We will learn this night. The same shadows began gathering, and then, almost without transition, we saw a man lying on his back in a pool of blood. Across the saddle, and two other men galloping off in a distance. Horror-stricken and sick at the sight of this picture, we desired to see no more. The old man, leaving the tent, called some of the Kurds standing outside and seemed to give them instructions. 2 minutes later, a dozen horsemen were galloping at full speed down the side of the mountain on which we were encamped. Early in the morning, they returned with the lost objects. The saddle was all covered with conjugated blood, and of course abandoned to them. The story they told was that upon coming in sight of the fugitive, they saw disappearing over the crest of a distant hill 2 horsemen. Upon riding up, the Tartar thief was found dead upon the stolen property, exactly as we had seen in the magical looking glass. He had been murdered by the 2 banditas, whose evident design to rob him was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a party sent by the old Kurdian. So they saw all this through a looking glass, as reported by H P Blavatsky and her party, who traveled through the Middle East and India, China, Mongolia area, Russia, gathering information about the occult, magic, witchcraft. The most remarkable results are produced by the Eastern wise men by the simple act of breathing upon a person. Listen up to this. The most remarkable results are produced by the Eastern wise men by the simple act of breathing upon a person, whether with good or evil intent. This is pure mesmerism. And there are a lot of people who put on shows in Vegas and other places who seem to have a unique ability to hypnotize the crowd of people. Mesmerization. This is pure mesmerism, and among the Persian dervishes who practice it, the animal magnetism is often reinforced by that of the elements. Wind, fire, water, air. If a person happens to stand facing a certain wind, there is always a danger, they think, and many of the learned ones in occult matters, witchcraft, can never be prevailed upon to go at sunset in a certain direction from whence the wind blows. We have known an old Persian from Buka on the Caspian Sea, who had the most unenviable reputation of throwing spells through the timely help of this wind, which blows but too often at that town, as its Persian name itself shows. If a victim against whom the wrath of the old fiend was kindled happened to be facing this wind, he would appear as if enchantment crossed the road rapidly and breathed in his face. From that moment, the latter would find himself afflicted with every evil. He was under the spell of the evil eye. Spell of the evil eye. Don't we have an all-seeing eye on the US dollar bill? Don't they use eyes, even symbols for TV channels? And NFL had the big eye coming up, American Idol, and a lot of the other satanic ritual shows. Funny what you learn when you continue to research. So let me read from the notes on the bottom of this page. We have twice assisted at the strange rites of the remnants of that sect of fire worshippers, known as the Ghibers, who assemble from time to time at Buka. on the Field of Fire. This ancient and mysterious town is situated near the Caspian Sea. It belongs to Russia, Georgia. About 12 miles northeast of Bucha stands the remnant of an ancient Guber temple consisting of 4 columns, from whose empty orifices issue constantly jets of fire, which gives it, therefore, the name the Temple of the Perpetual Fire. The whole region is covered with lakes and springs of Nipia. Pilgrims assemble there from distant parts of Asia. So a lot of pilgrims travel there to this ancient site. And a priesthood worshiping the divine principle of fire is kept by some tribes scattered hither and thither across the country. So what do we all know about reality? Not too much, I suspect. They don't teach you this in school. Alright, moving back to the story. The employment, remember we're talking about breathing on somebody and mesmerizing or hypnotizing them, casting evil spells. Just by walking by them and going, whew. Some people have that power. Listen up. The employment of the human breath by a sorcerer as an adjunct for the accomplishment of his nefarious purpose is strikingly illustrated in several terrible cases recorded in the French annuals, French documents, notably those of several Catholic priests. So I keep saying, and I'm very much aware of, in history of the Catholic Church, all the evil goings on. I grew up Catholic. I didn't grow up evil. And a lot of Catholic citizens across the world, and including probably a lot of priests and nuns and other people, are not evil and inside and know about the evil. Although at some monasteries and other church facilities, they have found buried numerous babies. Apparently the nuns got pregnant or something. So these people are as fallible as anybody else. But the problem that we all face today, like with the current Pope Francis the Jesuit, meeting in, I think, according to the documents, in Jerusalem, or at least leaders of all the churches, for some kind of consecration for 5 to 20 days. What are they going to consecrate? Israel? Some new person to be some kind of saint? Lucifer as a new god? Satan? Announcement of aliens? I guess we'll find out soon enough. When they have these rituals, we need to remember what I'm reading here and what I'm about to read next. So in the French annuals, notably by Catholic priests, and we're talking about sorcerers and mesmerization, even with the breath. In fact, these species of sorcery was known from the oldest times. The Emperor Justinian prescribed the severest penalties against such as should employ sorcery to do violence to chastity and to excite unlawful passion. Augustine, the City of God, warns against it. Jerome Gregory of Nazarenus, and many other ecclesiastical authorities, church authorities, lend their denunciation of a crime not uncommon among the clergy. Their denunciation of a crime not uncommon among the clergy. And we all are aware of the many priests who have been accused of molesting children, particularly young boys. Bassett relates the case of the cure of Préphane, who accomplished the ruin of a highly respected and virtuous lady, parishioner, at Dame de Lube by resort to sorcery, and was buried alive for it by the Parliament of Grenoble. So this one priest wanted this lady, and he defamed her. I guess he put her under a spell, had sex with her, by using sorcery, and was buried alive for it at Parlement de Grenoble. In 1611, a priest named Godfried was buried by the Parliament of Provence for seducing a penitent, somebody who was going there for penance, confessing their sins, at the confessional, named Madeleine de la Poulade, by breathing upon her and thus throwing her into a delirium of sinful love for him. Magic spells. The above cases are cited in the official report of the famous case of Father Gerard, a Jesuit priest of very great influence, who in 1731, did I get my speaking correctly, 1731, was tried before the Parliament at Aix, France, for the seduction of his parishioner, Millie Catherine Cadira of Toulon, and certain revolting crimes in connection with the same. The indictment charged that the offense was brought about by resort to sorcery. Madame Cadre, Catherine, was a young lady noted for her beauty, piety, and exemplary virtues. Her attention to her religious duties were exceptionally rigorous, and that was the cause of her prediction. Father Gerard's eye fell upon her, and he began to maneuver for her ruin. Gaining the confidence of the girl and her family by his apparent great sanctity, he one day made a pretext to blow his breath upon her. He knew how to mesmerize, hypnotize. The girl became instantly affected with a violent passion for him. She also had ecstatic visions of a religious character, stigmata, or blood marks of the passion, and hysterical convulsions. Now listen up. Her body had the symbols of the passion, with the holes in the hands and the feet, and the scar on the side like Jesus when he was crucified. So, was this mesmerization, hypnotization by this priest? Was he assisted by demonic entities, elementals, demons, angels? And apparently they have the power to put these marks on people. The long-sought opportunity of seclusion with his penitent finally offering, the Jesuit breathed upon her again, and before the poor girl recovered her senses, his object had been accomplished. So he had sex with the girl, and she didn't even know it. She was under hypnotization. By sophistry, and the excitement of her religious fervor, he kept up this illicit relation for months, without her suspecting that she had done anything wrong. Finally, however, her eyes were opened, her parents were informed, and the priest was arrested and arraigned. Judgment was rendered October 12, 1731, of 25 judges. 12 voted to send him to the stake. The criminal priest was defended, this sounds familiar, back in 1731, by all of the power of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And it is said that 1,000,000 francs, a lot of money, were spent to trying to suppress the evidence produced at the trial. The facts, however, were printed in a work in 5 volumes, now rare, entitled, I can't read it, it's in French, Rissoul Gerard des Pieces Contentances, Prose de la Pierre Jean Baptiste Gerard, Jesuit, etc., etc. I like my French, I can't speak. We have noted the circumstances that while under the sorcerer influence of Father Gerard and an illicit relation with him, Madame Cadre Catherine's body was marked with the stigmata of the Passion. The bleeding wounds of thorns on her brow, of nails in her hands and feet, and a lance cut on her side. Telling you, possession and demonic behavior is quite a problem. These people who run our world, these people who run our world, belonging to these secret societies or into the occult, might want to have a little beware sign on these temples in your town. What do they know? Witchcraft covens. Witches aren't bad. Illuminati are not bad. Rosicrucians, what you talking about, Rick? Freemasons, Zionists, Jesuits, Kabbalah people. The rituals they have at football halftime shows in the last few years with Madonna, Beyonce, Emmys, Grammys, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, and others. The song lyrics from Miley Cyrus, Bieber, the grand opening of that tunnel in Switzerland in the Alps, and more and more and more, the symbolism on TV shows. And think about this stuff. It should be added that the same marks were seen upon the bodies of 6 other penitents of this priest. So 6 other people who went to see this priest apparently were hypnotized and sexually abused, and these marks of the crucifixion of Jesus were up on their bodies. Madames Gouillou, Langier, Groter, Alamede, Barthelary, and Rubel. In fact, it became commonly remarked that Father Gerard's handsome parishioners were strangely given to ecstasies and the stigmata. So Father Gerard there seems like he might have been possessed and had the demonic powers. Like I said, whatever you do, don't play with a Ouija board and get into the occult. It's not spoken of well in the Bible, and of course Jesus says you need to test the spirits. Me and my research, I spent several years studying the pendulum and how to find water and such like that. Just researching the world's history of this. In Germany and England, they use the pendulum because the ground is roly-poly, it's not a mountain, to walk across the ground and find out where gold was or tin, and the pendulum would gyrate where it was, and they would put a stake in the ground, and so you could see where the vein was above the ground. Then they would dig down and find the mineral they were looking for. I have some of the books, 100, 200 years old, and the drawings and the logs and wood they would set up and the tunnels they would dig and all the workmen working. So this was in fact what they did. And of course I got books, Mr. Bird on dowsing, where the U.S. military used dowsers in Vietnam to find underground tunnels. And electrical men, cable TV guys, plumbing guys used dowsing rods to find underground wires and pipes that you can't see. But just to me, it seems that we all need to wake up to what the truth is and what we're dealing with. And the evil mesmerization, trances, and propaganda they put on TV, in the news, and the radio, the bombardment from the United Nations on the gay agenda, the Black Lives Matter, the immigration issue, global warming, biodiversity, pole shifting, earthquakes, and much more. We can't get a straight answer out of the people who control our country. So these same marks were found on several other people. Add this to the fact that in the case of Father Godfrey Godridi above noted, the same thing was proved upon surgical testimony to have happened to Madame de la Pole, and we have something worth the attention of all, especially spiritualists. We have something worth the attention of all, especially spiritualists, who imagine these stigmatas, these marks of Jesus when he was crucified, are produced by pure spirits. So apparently these spirits can put these marks on people. Barring the agency of the devil, whom we have quickly put to rest in another chapter. So Helena Blavatsky says in this book she has completely proven there is no such thing as the devil. You got to remember what book we're reading and who these people are. Catholics would be puzzled, we fancy, despite all their infallibility, to distinguish between the stigmata of the sorcerers and those produced by the intervention of the Holy Ghost or the angels. The church records abound in instances of alleged diabolical imitations of these signs of saintship, but as we have remarked, the devil is out of court. Moving on, by those who have followed us thus far, it will naturally be asked, to what practical issue this book tends? Much has been said about magic and its potentiality, much of the immense antiquity of its practice. Do we wish to affirm that the occult sciences ought to be studied and practiced throughout the world? This is the author. Would we replace modern spiritualism with the ancient magic? Neither. The substitution cannot be made, nor the study universally prosecuted, without incurring the risk of enormous public dangers. So we know we got the Illuminati ruling the world, and here Helena Blavatsky is warning enormous public dangers. You think with the HAARP microwave transmitters, the sky spraying, mercury in vaccines, fluoride in water, genetically modified foods that are rejected by your body, give rats tumors and cancers. Enormous public dangers by these people. At this moment, a well-known spiritualist and lecturer on mesmerism is imprisoned on a charge of raping a subject while he had hypnotized. So this would have been in 1880 or something when she wrote this book, 1877. At the time of this, a well-known mesmerizer, hypnotist, is imprisoned on a charge of raping a subject whom he had hypnotized. And remember, they're very sophisticated at it now. They can use TV programming and all kinds of other stuff, not to mention the drugs they have people on, and other things that they are beguiling society with alcohol and drugs. They have everybody deceived. A sorcerer is a public enemy. A sorcerer is a public enemy, and mesmerism may most readily be turned into the worst of sorceries. We would have neither scientists, theologians, nor spiritualists turn practical magicians. So they don't want scientists, preachers, spiritualists to turn into practical magicians, but all to realize that there were true science, profound religion, and genuine phenomenon before this modern era. We would that all who have a voice in education of the masses should first know and then teach that the safest guides to human happiness and enlightenment are those writings which have descended to us from the remotest antiquity, and that noble spiritual aspirations and a higher average morality prevail in the countries where the people take their precepts as the rule of their lives. Wouldn't that be nice if people would aspire to a higher level of morality? But they're trying to destroy that. I wonder why. Who's in charge of the world? It's obviously the satanic Lucifer doctrine by all the symbols we see of corporations and TV programming, movies, and rituals everywhere. We would have all to realize that magical, i.e. spiritual powers, exist in every man. I've been saying that for a while. And those few to practice them, who feel called to teach and are ready to pay the price of discipline and self-conquest, which their development exact. So a lot of people can be tempted and do evil things with these powers. Many men have arisen who had glimpses of the truth. Fancies they had it all. So they use this to make money too. And destroy people. Such have failed to achieve the good they might have done and sought to do because vanity, has made them thrust their personality into such undue prominence as to interpose it between their believers and the whole truth that lay behind. The world needs no sectarian church, whether of Buddha, Jesus, Mohammed, Swedenborg, Calvin, or any other. There being but one truth, man requires but one church, the temple of God within us, walled in by matter, but penetrable by anyone who can find the way. The pure in heart see God. So they don't advocate, as we already know, H P Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society speak very ill of the Christian church, which I believe in Jesus and Jesus' teaching and the Ten Commandments, but I'm not a big fan of the Christian church, who believe that the Pope is supposed to be the communication between the people and God. And of course then you have the Orthodox Christians up around Turkey and Greece, and who didn't want to have the Pope to be their interface between God. And so the Christian church were destroying those Christians because they wouldn't listen to the Pope and follow the Pope and worship the Pope. We've got some more nasty information coming. This is only the first video out of this book. There's a wealth of information in here. If you can find it, go buy it. ISIS Unveiled. This is only volume 2. Can't even imagine what volume 1 looks like or what's in it. The Trinity of nature is the lock of magic. The Trinity of man, the key that fits it. Within the solemn precincts of the sanctuary, the Supreme had and has no name. So they're just like this saying. The Supreme has and has no name. And remember, the Zionist Jewish folks feel that they're the chosen ones, and the rest of us that are non-Jews were born to serve them. And of course, with the Georgia Guidestones, they want to eliminate 90% of the population, maybe. They just don't need the people. So we do have evil people running the planet. And they're in charge of the nuclear weapons, and it seems like they're getting ready for World War III and some other very nasty deeds. It is unthinkable and unpronounceable, and yet every man finds in himself his God. All right, I'm going to try to finish this video. Page 635. Who art thou, O fair being? Inquires this disembodied soul in the corridor Avesta, at the gates of paradise. Who art thou, O fair being? Inquires a disembodied soul at the gates of paradise. I am, O soul, thy good and pure thoughts, thy works and the good law, thy angel and thy God. The man or the soul is reunited with itself, for this Son of God is one with him. It is his own mediator, the God of his human soul and his justifier. God not revealing himself immediately to men, the spirit of his interpreter, says Plato in the Symposium. Who is God, according to this? So I guess H P Blavatsky is trying to explain what she's trying to do here by telling all this stuff. Besides, there are many good reasons why the study of magic, except in its broad philosophy, is nearly impractical in Europe and America. get this, magic being what it is, the most difficult of all sciences to learn, experimentally, its acquisition is practically beyond the reach of the majority of white-skinned people. And that whether their effort is made at home or in the East. Well, I know here in the United States, our intuitive and psychic abilities seem to be largely suppressed intentionally by putting fluoride in the waters, which was done at the behest of the Illuminati Rockefellers 100 years ago, the early 1910, 1920. I suspect they knew what they were doing by calcifying the pineal gland with the fluoride. My research has led me to believe that. And apparently they've continued their bloodline interbreeding, which apparently their DNA, some say, and it seems likely, is some kind of reptilian DNA, and allows them to have a higher degree of psychic abilities. Mesmerization even, probably. Even remote viewers who were seriously experienced said that they could enter other people's bodies and make them do things, including probably shoot another person. FYI. Makes us wonder about some of these shootings. What are they doing? Playing with these magical sorcery skills. What are we up against as we the people of the world? Who they plan on reducing the population and microchipping everybody and taking away property rights, i.e. communism? Just saying, adding my 2 cents here. So they said here, white-skinned people, it's very difficult for them to come to grips with using the magical skills. And that, whether their effort is made at home or in the East. Probably not more than 1 in a million of European blood is fitted, either physically, morally, or psychologically. Which brings me to another thought by Tex Mars, the one who wrote several books. And he sends out newsletters, and one of his newsletters, he said, most, if not all, CEO of world corporations, the CEOs are Jewish. And it is my thinking from my research, they don't want Christians or other good people to be the CEOs because they're probably too morally structured. They would not go along with the evil things that the corporations are doing, like building FEMA camps and buying and manufacturing hollow point bullets and building microwave transmitters and spraying chemicals in the sky and so much more horrible things they're doing to people. Like in Venezuela right now, they're starving the people to death in that nation, which is rich in resources. So somebody's planning for a future with less people, and then they need a microchip and manage the rest of the people they keep. And it seems to be these reptilian DNA types I've gone over in previous videos. So to become a practical magician, and not 1 in 10 million would be found endowed with these 3 qualifications. So that somebody like me, they're saying, would not be physically, morally, or psychologically capable to be a practical magician, are required for the work. Civilized nations lack the phenomenal powers of endurance, both mental and physical, of the Easterners, the favoring temperamental idiosyncrasies of the Orientals is utterly waiting in them. So the Orientals have more of a propensity or a capability to learn how to use magical powers. In the Hindu, Arabian, and the Tibetan, an intuitive perception of the possibilities of the occult natural forces is subjection to human will. Comes by inheritance. So these Tibetans and Arabians and people out there in the West, the intuitive perception of the possibilities, so they just know, of the occult natural forces in subjection to human will comes by inheritance. And in them, the physical senses, as well as in the spiritual, are far more finely developed than in the Western races. Again, I don't agree with that. Notwithstanding the notable differences of thickness between the skulls of a European and a Southern Hindu, this difference being purely climatic result due to the intensity of the sun's rays, involves no psychological principles. Furthermore, there would be tremendous difficulties in the way of training, if we can so express it, contaminated by centuries of dogmatic superstition, by an ineradicable, quite unwarranted sense of superiority over those whom the English term as contemptuously, and she's using the bad name for black people, the white European would hardly submit himself to the practical tuition of either the Cope, Brahma, or Lama. So they're saying we white people would not lend ourselves to the difficult training. To become a neophyte, one must be ready to devote himself heart and soul to the study of mystic sciences. And I've done some video recently on the initiation process, and they totally have to surrender themselves, and I'm beginning to think is what they have to surrender themselves to are these spiritual demonic entities. They have to allow themselves to have these entities operate through them. The spirit must hold in complete subjection the combativeness of what is loosely termed educated reason until facts have vanquished cold human sophistry. Well, I think that's enough from this book, but I did have something else I wanted to go over, related. Thought I'd take a look at another book about Madame Blavatsky, medium and magician. I've shown this in previous videos, by John Simons. I think I'll read a little bit more so we can learn a little bit more about Madame Blavatsky. I went and highlighted this on the chapter 10, the astral light. So what do people believe? Well, listen up. Let's see what we think. On her return from Ithaca, Helena Blavatsky learned that the next meeting of the Theosophical Society was to be held in the home of Mrs. Emma Harding Britton, a successful medium and gifted speaker. So mediums, of course, are people who are psychic and can do readings and seances, intuitive, psychic, communicate with the other non-physical reality, maybe. Miss Britton was on the verge of publishing a fairly long book called Art Magic, which she said she had not written, but taken down at the dictation of an adept of her acquaintance called Cavalier Lewis. Like other adepts, the Cavalier Lewis was a shadowy figure. Although the author of the work, his name does not appear on the title page of Art Magic, and Miss Britton's name appears only at the end of her short preface. With customary obtuseness, the librarians of the British Museum have catalogued the book under Miss Britton's name as if she and not Cavalier was the author. So what is an adept? somebody who's been initiated, illumined into the arts of magic, a magician. There is more magic than art in art magic. It affirms the existence of adepts and the reality of astral light, and of white and black magic. I kid you not, this is what we're talking about. It also affirms, as one would expect, the swarming of elementals in the air, invisible beings, which apparently hook up to your thought forms, good or bad, in the air and on the earth, and gives direction for bringing them to heal. So magic is controlling these elemental energies all around us. Its price was high for those days, $5. So you could go see a medium and I guess get some kind of control done, something magical done for $5. Before the publication of the work, a prospectus was issued in which it stated that the author would only permit 500 copies to be printed. That was art magic. And that the right for refusing to sell the work to anyone found unworthy would be reserved. So they would only sell these art magic books to people that they found that were worthy. This was no idle threat. There's a little note on the bottom of this page. There are, according to the Theosophical and spiritualist writers, other non-physical worlds. Remember, this is the New Age philosophy, religion, maybe. The worlds nearest to the physical world is the astral, so-called because of the luminous quality of its atmosphere. Here thoughts dwell in themselves, apart from the human mind. So thoughts exist. This world is said to be bathed in astral light, which is the light visions are seen by. The banner of light under the heading of the Slanderers of Art Magic stated that she had refused to sell 20 copies of the book to the little pugs. The Colonel subscribed to 2 copies of Art Magic, and after he had read it, he wrote and asked Miss Britton if she could let him see a portrait of the Cavalier, the adept who quoted the book to her, on the express condition that he showed it to no one outside the house. Miss Britton sent him a portrait drawing. The Colonel was not impressed. To his mind, the Cavalier Lewis had neither the age nor the stern features which he associated with an adept. On the contrary, the Cavalier, with his mutton chop whiskers and a face as vapid as that of a fashionable lady killer, looking quite unlike any adept and no more than 25 years of age. One would have been face to face with a real adept, wrote the Colonel, would by the time he wrote this had been face to face with several adepts, so the Colonel would know. Would be forced by this infeminable dawdler's countenance to suspect that either Miss Britton had shown a bogus portrait to the real author, of the real author, and the book was written by no Cavalier Lewis at all. So a little bit of a mystery here, but she did write the book called Art Magic and reserved the right who she would sell it to. So I'm going to have to try to see if I can look up that book and get a copy. A Mr. C.C. Massey, English lawyer, barrister, and spiritualist, was waiting to catch a boat for England. For this reason, he was introduced first at the Theosophical Society's meeting. He made some remarks and then hurried away. The members got down to discussing the bylaws. So this Theosophical Society, Lucifer Publishing, Lucifer Magazines, New Age Religion, ISIS, Unveiled, Secret Doctrine. A lot of planning going on here. According to the Colonel, Madame Blavatsky had begun writing ISIS Unveiled before she went to Ithaca. Dr. Eugene Carson is therefore wrong when he says that she started this work in his parents' home. Get this. I wrote this last night by order. But what the deuce it is to be, I don't know, said Helena Blavatsky. So these interdimensional beings or masters would appear and order Helena Blavatsky what to write. And she handed the Colonel several sheets of paper covered with her handwriting. Perhaps it is for a newspaper article, perhaps for a book, perhaps for nothing. Anyhow, I did as I was ordered. After the Colonel had read the sheets, she put them away in a drawer and said nothing further. The order was, of course, from the master, whose name was not divulged. So we got some pictures in this book. Of these masters. Here's a couple pictures. The great teacher, Swami Dayananda Sharavita. And Alan Octavian Hume, father of the Indian National Congress. And some of the masters, Kut Humi and Mora. Can't see with the glare of the sun. So just interesting material. One other thing I wanted to read about the Colonel. I got a picture of the Colonel here in this book. One of the leaders of the Theosophical Society. So I'm just trying to share some more information about these people who created the Theosophical Society, which is part of the, I guess, the New Age cult with an office next door to the United Nations. And apparently have some kind of beings behind the scenes interfacing with them. Interdimensional beings, beings from the astral plane, from the spirit world. Well, listen to this. We just saw a picture of the Colonel. He was in the midst of a last read and the smoke of his pipe before turning in. The book the Colonel makes a point of telling us was not a book on ghosts. So the Colonel was getting ready to go to bed, and he was reading a book. Suddenly he grew aware of something white in the right-hand corner of the room. He looked up and then dropped his book in astonishment. The master was before him. So I just showed you two pictures of the masters, Kut Huni and the other one. So the Colonel says, I saw towering above me in his great statue, an Oriental, clad in white garments and wearing a headcloth or turban of amber striped fabric, hand embroidered in yellow floss silk. Long raven hair, so that'll be black hair, hung from under his turban to the shoulders, his black beard parted vertically on the chin in a Rajput fashion, and twisted up at the ends and carried over the ears. His eyes were alive with soul fire. Ears which were at once benignant, B-E-N-I-G-N-A-N-T, and piercing in glance the eyes of a mentor and a judge, but softened by the love of a father who gazed on a son needing counsel. He was so grand a man, so imbued with the majesty of moral strength, so luminous, spiritual, so evidently above average humanity, that I felt abashed in his presence and bowed my head. So here's the colonel in his room going to bed, and in the corner of a room appears this being, apparently really tall, with a turban on his head, and his mustache was curled up around his ears. Bowed my head and bent my knee as one does before a god or godlike personage. A hand was lightly laid on my head. A sweet strong voice bade me be seated. And when I raised my eyes, the presence was seated in the other chair beyond the table. He told the colonel that he had come at a crucial time in the colonel's life, and that his actions had brought him to this point. So this being appears in the colonel's room. Listen up to this. Whether or not they were to meet often in the future as co-workers for the good of mankind depended on the colonel. In order to encourage the colonel to say yes, the master told him that there was a great work waiting to be done for humanity. I got alarm bells going off in my head. This ghost appears, and they're going to do some great work for humanity. And that he had a right to share in this work if he wished. So this interdimensional being that appeared in his room is asking the colonel if he'd like to be involved. This is the Theosophical Society, writing big, thick, huge books like this. And the Secret Doctrine, I've shown you that and made some videos as a big, thick book like this. And this is volume 2. I got to order volume 1, another thick book like this. And, of course, this book. And many others of this material that I've been going over. Rosicrucian, Initiation, Freemasons, Moral and Dogma, Skull and Bones, George Bush. The master went on to say that a mysterious tie had drawn him, the colonel, and Helena Blavatsky together. A strange tie. He told me about things about Helena Blavatsky that I may not repeat, as well as things about myself that do not concern third parties. How long he was there I cannot tell. It might have been a half an hour or an hour. It seemed but a minute. So little did I take note of the flight of time. At last he rose, I wondering at his great height and observing the sort of splendor in his countenance. Not an external shining, but a soft gleam, as it were, of an inner light, that of a spirit. It did occur to the colonel, even while the master was still there before him, that it all might be an illusion. And the wish entered his mind that the master might leave behind some tangible proof of his visit. The master suddenly smiled. He could read the colonel's thoughts. The next moment he untwisted his fata, or turban, from his head, and saluted the colonel goodbye and vanished. He had gone. The chair was empty, so this being just vanished. But on the table lay an embroidered headcloth. There was no doubt about that. The colonel, trembling with emotion, picked it up. Then he ran and beat on Helena Blavatsky's door and told her of his experience. He had been face to face with one of the Mahatmas, a secret master. So what did they say they were going to do here? A great work waiting to be done for humanity. And he invited the colonel and Helena Blavatsky to be part of this. So there you have it. Is this stuff to be taken seriously? I'm going to read a lot more from this book and make more videos. Make no mistake about it. ISIS Unveiled. The ISIS we all know about right now is in the Middle East slaughtering Arabs. In Iraq, apparently there are witnesses and the bones to prove it, but they were slaughtering Arabs and burying them with bulldozers in big holes. There's something going on this planet, and we all ought to wake up. I know that there's an economic war going on, and in the United States we're benefiting from the lower price of gas. But think about it, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Iran, and all those countries who were sustaining their economy on the higher prices, the whole price per barrel of gas has dropped to the floor, and all those countries are suffering largely right now. And these are the things wars are made of. And I even read a press release today that some writer from PJ magazine or newsletter said that Iran said they were happy to go to war with the USA, which I don't believe they said that. And I read through the article and I couldn't see where they said that, but that was the headline. So there's something more mysterious going on in our world, and it just might behoove us to wake up and see why they want to bring us this new age, new world order, take away our guns in America, bring us Agenda 21, now called 2030, and all this propaganda with the gay agenda, sustainability, biodiversity, global warming, climate change, terrorism, droughts even in Maine and Massachusetts. And apparently, there was a press release I saw today also, and these I didn't have to look for, I'm just checking my email, they're right there. But apparently in Siberia, Russia, all the ice is melting, and apparently the dead reindeer that were frozen in the ice are thawing out, and apparently causing disease situations, including the creation of anthrax from the rotting flesh of the reindeer. So the propaganda is going on and on and on, and I don't think it's going to stop. I think there's a premeditated endgame, a new paradigm coming, and it certainly seems to me it's going to be like a Hunger Games movie type of thing, Divergent the movie type of thing, H.G. Wells, 1884 the book, and a lot of other documentation that tells us they want a new world order. Why, and how will it affect us? And according to the USA Georgia Guidestones, they want to depopulate the planet and kill off about 90% of the people? Should we believe this magic and interdimensional being, spiritual world, non-physical reality, which I believe has everything to do with the aliens, UFOs, and all the ancient monuments all over the planet? So I will continue to research and report. Thank you for watching my videos. Rick Miracle reporting.